The phone shouldn't have been there. 4 inches below the soil, wrapped in a thin layer of plastic. Screen spider cracked, but still intact enough to light up when the forensic tech pressed the button. A faint vibration, then a ghostly home screen image. 11:42 a.m., August 8, 2019. The coordinates belonged to a stretch of trail just outside Jackson, Wyoming, where runners passed daily and tourists snapped photos of elk crossing the ridge. But that morning, it wasn't hikers who arrived. It was a sheriff's search unit following the lead of a cadaver dog named Nova. The dog had stopped suddenly at the base of a cottonwood, whining and pawing the earth. Under that tree, 4 years of silence began to unravel. August 8, 2019, 7:30 a.m. 31-year-old Rachel Hale laced her running shoes, checked the weather app, 60 degrees, clear, and texted her roommate, going out early before work. Usual loop. The usual loop was a 7-mile path along the Snake River Greenway, a place so familiar that she could have run it blindfolded. She'd lived in Jackson for 3 years, teaching art at the community college and volunteering at an animal shelter on weekends. Security footage from a gas station showed her jogging past at 7:46, ponytail swinging, neon armband flashing in rhythm. By 9 a.m., when she hadn't returned, her roommate called. By noon, deputies were at the trailhead. They found her car parked neatly under the cottonwoods, keys, wallet, and water bottle inside. But no Rachel. For 3 weeks, Teton County Sheriff's Office organized daily searches. Helicopters scanned the canyon. Drones swept the ridgelines. Volunteer teams marked the trail with orange ribbons, each one representing a completed sector. There were no signs of the struggle, no footprints leading off the main path. Only one object drew attention, a single wireless earbud lodged in gravel near mile 3. Detective Aaron Miles, the case lead, kept repeating the same question. How does a runner vanish in daylight on a full trail? Witness reports offered fragments. A couple hiking near the overlook claimed they'd seen a woman in pink stretching near a wooden fence around 8:15. A cyclist remembered a car parked farther down than usual. None of it formed a pattern. By early September 2019, national outlets had picked up the story. Teacher vanishes on morning run in Wyoming. Tips flooded in. Sightings in Idaho, Montana, even Utah. All dead ends. The case went cold within months. For Rachel's parents, who lived in Boise, the pain settled into routine. Every August they posted the same message online. Still searching, still hoping. Her father, a retired park ranger, refused to call it a loss. She knows the land, he said. If anyone could survive out here, it's her. But winter after winter, the mountains gave nothing back. Then, in October 2023, the drought hit. The Snake River dropped to its lowest level in decades, exposing old trails and floodplains once hidden by water. That's when a new volunteer team, organized by retired canine handler Deborah Lang, asked permission to resurvey the area, with cadaver and electronics dogs trained to detect lithium traces from decomposing phone batteries. It was an experimental method, rarely used outside military recovery projects. Sheriff's Office agreed. At this point, Miles said, we'll try anything. On the second morning of the sweep, Nova, the youngest of the dogs, froze near the cottonwoods where Rachel's car had been parked 4 years earlier. She circled, sniffed, then began digging at a shallow mound beneath the roots. Within minutes, the tip of a black phone case appeared. Technicians handled it like glass. When they powered it on at the evidence lab, the faint light revealed an almost drained battery and a blurred wallpaper photo. Rachel and her students at an art fair. But it wasn't the image that mattered. It was the timestamp. The phone had recorded movement until 8:29 a.m. on the day she vanished, then stopped completely. Buried under the case's back cover was a single clump of fabric, nylon, pink, matching the color of her running shirt. The casing bore microscopic scratches, consistent with impact against gravel. Someone, or something, had buried it carefully under 4 inches of soil, shielded from direct weather. Detective Miles reopened the file the next morning. "Phones don't bury themselves," he said. Within hours, forensic analysts began reconstructing the phone's GPS log using residual chip data. To everyone's shock, it worked. A sequence of coordinates traced Rachel's final movements minute by minute. At 7:54 a.m., the data showed steady pace, jogging south. At 8:22, speed slowed near the overlook. At 8:27, location shifted 50 yards off-trail toward the riverbank. At 8:29, signal ceased. Between the overlook and that riverbank sat an abandoned irrigation access road, closed since 2010, fenced but easily climbable. The coordinate pattern suggested she'd left the trail voluntarily. But why? Miles drove out to the site himself. Even after years of weather, tire tracks from maintenance vehicles scarred the dirt. He stood exactly where the phone's last ping had occurred and saw it, a glint of rusted metal. Through sagebrush, he brushed it with his boot, an old license plate, snapped clean in half. He radioed the team, "Mark this. This isn't random." The plate traced back to a 1997 Ford Ranger once owned by Eli Turner, a local seasonal worker who had lived in Jackson briefly during 2019. Turner had left town weeks after Rachel's disappearance, later arrested in Montana for unrelated property crimes. At the time, he'd been questioned but cleared because there was no evidence tying him to the case. Until now, when Miles reopened the archived interview files, one detail stood out. Turner had worked part-time clearing brush for the county's irrigation department, the same access road where the phone data ended. He'd also owned 2 dogs, one of which matched prints found near the trail years earlier, but never identified. The trail camera images, once dismissed as inconclusive animal movement, suddenly looked like paw prints in motion. The search area shifted again. For the first time since 2019, investigators believed they were standing near where Rachel's trail truly ended. At first light, forensic teams began a new dig along the old access road, expanding outward from the buried phone coordinates. Each meter was mapped, scanned, and sifted. By mid-afternoon, the soil technician's trowel hit resistance, a piece of degraded plastic tarp folded over a hollow. Inside lay fabric fibers, buttons, and the remains of a digital wristwatch, stopped at 8:30 a.m. That's when Miles knew. The phone's clock hadn't been coincidence. Something had happened in that single minute between 8:29 and 8:30. He looked at the horizon where the Snake River bent west. Beyond the trees, wind moved across the grass like breath. The mountain had finally decided to answer. The air that morning carried the smell of wet dirt and thawing pine. For the first time in 4 years, there was movement on the old irrigation road. Sheriff's trucks idling in formation, yellow tape fluttering, and a small tent shading forensic techs as they sifted through buckets of soil. Every inch of ground around the phone coordinates was being treated like a map of Rachel Hale's last hour. To Detective Aaron Miles, it felt like walking into the past mid-sentence. Hearing the echo of something unfinished, the soil analysis came back first. Buried in the same layer as the cell phone were fragments of rubberized material, the kind used for vehicle floor mats. Lab results confirmed the polymer compound matched Ford manufacturing codes from the late 1990s, the same decade as Eli Turner's Ranger. It wasn't proof, but it connected threads that had been invisible for years. Next came a deeper find. At a depth of 20 inches, ground-penetrating radar flagged an anomaly, roughly 3 feet wide. Technicians brushed away sediment until a human-made shape appeared, a shovel blade, its handle long rotten, but still embedded upright as if left mid-dig. Beneath it, they uncovered a torn section of nylon windbreaker consistent with the pink running jacket Rachel had worn. Inside the folded cloth, investigators found a small house key wrapped in tissue. It belonged to her apartment. Miles stared at the bagged evidence, silent. Someone buried what they couldn't carry, the tech murmured. Meanwhile, digital analysts cracked the final encrypted layer of Rachel's phone chip. The reconstructed GPS path displayed a new line of data. A Bluetooth handshake recorded at 8:26 a.m. Her phone had connected briefly to another device, a 2009 Ford Ranger infotainment unit. The MAC address matched the VIN of Eli Turner's truck. It was the missing minute between the trail and the riverbank. Rachel hadn't veered off the path for no reason. She'd encountered a vehicle, maybe someone she knew, or thought she knew. By late afternoon, Miles contacted Montana authorities. Turner had been released the previous year after serving a property theft sentence. He was living in Billings, working odd construction jobs under his own name. When the call came, he agreed to meet voluntarily. He didn't yet know that evidence teams were already reconstructing his truck from scrapyard parts, most of it sold for salvage in 2020. But a single component, a floor mat corner, had survived in county storage. Its wear pattern matched the rubber fragments found near Rachel's phone. The interview took place in a gray conference room at the Yellowstone County substation. Turner walked in with the slow confidence of someone who'd been questioned before. He was 41 now, sun-creased face, grease under his nails. Miles set a photo on the table, the recovered phone half buried under roots. Turner barely looked at it. Miles kept his voice calm. "You were working brush clearance off the Snake River Road that summer." Turner nodded. "County contract. 2 weeks. You left town 10 days after she disappeared." He shrugged. "Job ended. Nothing to stay for." Then Miles slid the second photo forward. Pink fabric, dirt-streaked, with the key visible through the evidence bag. Turner's throat tightened. His eyes flicked toward the mirror glass. For 3 minutes, no one spoke. Then he said quietly, "I never meant for her to get hurt." Turner's version came out in pieces. He'd been hauling scrap when he saw Rachel running past the closed road gate. His dog slipped from the truck bed, barking, and startled her. She stumbled, hit the gravel, and dropped her phone. He said he panicked. He'd been on probation then, and tried to help, but she wouldn't stop yelling. He claimed he drove off, circled back later, and found only her phone in the dirt. "So you buried it?" Miles asked. "I didn't want people thinking I took her," Turner said. "That's all." The detectives exchanged glances. Even if true, it didn't explain the nylon jacket, or the key, or why her watch had stopped exactly 1 minute after the phone did. Back in Wyoming, forensic teams expanded the dig another 50 feet west, following the direction Turner had driven. At sunset, Nova, the same canine who'd first found the phone, alerted again. Her paws scraped at a mound of compacted clay. Inside, techs uncovered a shallow trench lined with plastic sheeting. Within it, vertebrae, running shoe soles, and a fragment of wrist bone, still encircled by a fitness tracker. Time and terrain had preserved just enough. The serial number on the tracker matched Rachel's purchase history from 2018. DNA confirmed it 2 days later. For 4 years, everyone had searched the ridgelines and riverbanks. She'd been less than half a mile from her car the entire time. Beneath soil, Turner himself had helped move while clearing brush. He'd buried her with the same shovel, now cataloged as evidence. When confronted with the forensic results, Turner's expression barely changed. He said, "You can't prove I killed her." Miles replied softly, "You buried her." At trial later that year, prosecutors presented the digital map reconstructed from Rachel's phone, the pulsing dots of her final minutes slowing near the irrigation road. They showed the Bluetooth pairing to Turner's truck, the rubber fragments, and the single photo recovered from the phone's cloud backup. A blurred image taken accidentally during the fall, sky, gravel, and what appeared to be the edge of a boot. The tread matched Turner's work shoes. It took jurors 4 hours. Guilty of second-degree manslaughter and concealment of a body, Turner received 28 years. When sentence was read, Rachel's parents sat hand in hand. Her mother whispered she finally came home. Detective Miles kept the case board up for one last week before closing it. Pinned at the center was the photo of Nova the dog, muzzle dusty from the dig, tail wagging beside the recovered phone. He wrote on the whiteboard, "Technology found her, but it took a dog to listen." That spring, the community college where Rachel had taught installed a small sculpture garden. In her memory, abstract steel arcs painted the same shade of pink as her running jacket. A plaque read, "In motion, she saw light. In stillness, she showed it." When Miles visited, he stood beside her father. "You ever think about the phone?" the man asked. "Every day," Miles said. "It wasn't buried to hide it. It was buried to wait." By the time the snow returned to Jackson, the cottonwoods at the trailhead were bare again. The same stretch of earth that had once hidden Rachel's phone was now marked by a simple sign, Rachel Hale Trail, dedicated February 2025. Visitors paused at the marker, reading the inscription before starting their run. Some touched it as if for luck. Others whispered her name. Detective Aaron Miles stood at the dedication ceremony, quietly in the back, hands in his coat pockets. He told himself he wouldn't speak, but when Rachel's mother asked him to say something, he stepped forward. "She loved this path," he said, voice catching slightly. "Every search we did started right here. For 4 years, this ground kept a secret. When it was ready, it told us everything." There was no applause, just the sound of wind moving through branches, the same wind that had once covered her tracks. After Turner's conviction, Jackson felt both lighter and sadder. For years, people had lived with the feeling that something unfinished lingered just beyond the trail. Now, there was closure, but also a strange silence where the mystery used to be. Rachel's parents refused to let that silence settle. They partnered with the animal shelter where she had volunteered and funded a new search and rescue canine training program, naming it after Nova, the dog who had found her phone. The program's slogan, painted above the kennels, read, "Sometimes the smallest voice is the one that finds you." Within a year, 2 of Nova's pups were certified search dogs. One was assigned to the Seine County team that had once combed those trails in vain. Detective Miles finally took his first vacation in years. He drove north through Yellowstone and into Montana, following the same route Turner had taken when he fled. He stopped once near the border, stepping out to watch the late autumn sunset paint the sky orange. He thought about Rachel's last minutes, the phone connecting to the truck, the fall, the stillness. How technology had frozen that moment forever, waiting until time and persistence could translate it back into human meaning. Back home, he boxed up the evidence photos, but he kept one, a close-up of the cracked phone screen glowing faintly in the dirt. He framed it on his office wall with a line from the case notes written beneath. "Buried 4 inches deep, found 4 years later, still trying to call home." The phone itself went on display at the Wyoming Law Enforcement Museum, part of an exhibit on breakthroughs in cold case technology. Beside it, a looping video showed Nova wagging her tail beside the evidence tent. School groups came often. Teachers explained how data recovery and scent detection worked hand in hand. For most visitors, though, what stayed with them wasn't the science. It was the ordinariness of it all. A morning jog, a misplaced phone, a gap in time that grew into years. The exhibit's final panel read, "She left a trail even she didn't know she was making." In March 2025, a letter arrived at the sheriff's office from Rachel's father. Inside was a single photograph, the sunrise over Snake River, light reflecting off the frozen surface. On the back, he'd written, "When the thaw comes, the river never forgets its path. Thank you for listening long enough to hear hers." Miles kept the photo in his wallet. Sometimes he'd pull it out during night shifts, holding it under the desk lamp until the colors looked like morning again. By summer, the trail saw more runners than ever. Locals said it felt safer, though nothing had really changed except awareness. At dawn, volunteers from the college would leave ribbons for the new canine trainees to track, bright strips of pink nylon. From a distance, the color caught the light like a heartbeat. One of the dogs, Nova's youngest pup, stopped at the old tree near the start of the loop and pawed at the soil the way her mother once had. The handler laughed softly. She remembers. On the one-year anniversary of the discovery, Rachel's parents returned to the trailhead before sunrise. They set down a bouquet of wildflowers, the kind she used to paint in her sketchbooks, and watched the first runners arrive. When they turned to leave, Rachel's mother looked back at the plaque. The engraving caught the light for a moment, and she whispered, "We found you." Her husband added quietly, "And you found us back." Later that day, Miles visited the overlook where the case had begun. He stood where the path bent toward the irrigation road, now fenced and posted with warning signs. The wind was steady, the same direction it had blown on the morning she vanished. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine that missing minute. The sound of footsteps, the bark of a dog, the brief panic of something going wrong. But what he pictured instead was the stillness after, the way the earth had tucked her story away, detail by detail, waiting until the world was ready to pay attention. He whispered, "We're listening now." The official report ended with a single line under resolution: "Remains recovered, case closed, truth restored." But Miles knew that wasn't the real ending. The real ending was happening every day. Every runner who tied their shoes, every student who joined the K9 program, every volunteer who carried a piece of the story forward without even realizing it. Rachel's trail had turned from a place of loss into one of vigilance. It was how small towns heal, not by forgetting, but by remembering with purpose. That evening, as twilight fell over the Snake River, the temperature dropped sharply. The trees shimmered in the wind, their branches creaking like quiet applause. Miles watched from his car until darkness erased the outlines of the trail. He thought about how stories survive not in headlines, but in motion, the steady rhythm of people still running, still searching, still finding. In the end, Rachel Hale wasn't defined by her disappearance, but by the trail that still carried her name and by the phone that refused to die until someone listened.